For today's show, I'd like to talk about women's and men's preferences for short-term and long-term relationships. Turns out that the data says that there's a big difference between the two. But first, I really want to talk about an issue that I see with a lot of young men these days. They seem to be extremely insecure. And their perception of what women want is extremely skewed. And what it does is it leads them to be angry and in some ways sometimes destructive to themselves, but also to women, if I'm being honest. And I see this a lot, and I think it's really taken off since there's a lot of these communities online. So a few of these communities I'll talk about. One is called incels, which means involuntary celibate. We have MRAs, the men's rights activists. We've got MGTOW, which means men going their own way. We have the alt-right, which is kind of like a new version of conservatism, where they really believe in very strict gender roles, and they don't like the way the world is changing to where women are becoming more powerful, egalitarian, equal with men, and they see that as society going the wrong way. And what you'll see is that they're very, let's say, angry and sometimes demeaning towards women, and you'll see this a lot on dating sites as well. I know a lot of young men, unfortunately, that are involved with this, and they really do believe in what they call the 6 sixes. So I think I need to go over this. So the 6 sixes, as these types of men see it, is what their perception of what women want. So let me go over this. They think women need a man with a 6-figure income, 6-pack abs, a 600 horsepower car, to be 6 feet tall, to be 6 months out of a relationship, and to have a 6-inch penis. So this to me seems kind of childish, but I really need to go over it because it's everywhere and it's affecting the dating scene tremendously. This 6 sixes is more prescriptive than descriptive. It's almost like taking what they think a guy should be rather than what the average man is. So I'm going to prove that. So 6 figures. The average man in America makes about $50,000 a year, so it's half of a 6-figure income. They're afraid because they're insecure that women want guys with 6-pack abs. Well, 66% of American men are overweight. They say they want, women want a man with a 600 horsepower car, which is an analogy, I guess you could say, for an expensive car, Mercedes, BMW, something to that effect. Well, the average man in America owns a Toyota Camry. That's the most popular car in America. 6 feet tall. Well, the average man in America is 5'9", and only 15% of men are 6 feet tall. 6 months since you've been in a relationship, I've got nothing to say about that because I think that's correct. I think that's a good thing. I think that makes a lot of sense for people. And 6-inch penis that they're worried about, interestingly, because the average man in America, according to science, is 5.17 inches, which is not really that big of a difference that they're complaining about. But oddly enough, if you look at the most popular dildo in America that's sold to women, that what they prefer is 6 inches. Now you could say that 6 inches is bigger than 5.17. But listen, they have to be able to hold on to it, to be able to use it. So that's probably at least an inch right there. So there's nothing to complain about. So I just don't see why these men are complaining. But here's some other reasons why they complain. We are moving into a situation where there's less strict gender roles and there's more of egalitarian relationships. And with an egalitarian culture, it means that women are also going to seek more things in men. And what happens is that a lot of the needs that men and women have are almost identical. And that scares a lot of men. Also, there's been an an extreme increase in women going to college. And what do college women want? They typically want men who are also educated. Turns out when there's extra women in college and there's less men in college, again, men are going to feel insecure because there's more women searching for men that have a higher criteria, let's say. They're higher up on the hierarchy. And there's not that many men there anymore, which creates an interesting dynamic because we've all heard of the hookup culture. Now, if you're the type of man who wants to put down women, what you'll do is you'll try to shame them. And you'll say the reason why there's hookup culture is because women are promiscuous. But that's not really true. What it is that there's more women chasing fewer and fewer men. So women tend to be a little bit more outward aggressive in order to get the attention of men. So what you're seeing is the hookup culture is based upon women making themselves more valuable, making themselves better in the marketplace, earning more money, doing more work, and looking for fewer and fewer guys that are actually going out there and working, and they're playing video games instead. So you're seeing that. So now let's go to men's and women's preferences. Well, we have to break it down. So we have short-term relationships, and by short-term, I mean, it could mean one day. So when we look at a one-night stand, men and women, again, are virtually identical. The number one thing that people look for in a one-night stand is sexual desirability. It means you want somebody who's physically attractive, you want somebody that's sexually passionate and open, and someone who's extremely open to experience. Again, this is equal for men and women. There's no difference here. So that one's really easy. So let's switch to long-term relationship preferences. And here we notice a little bit of differences. But let's go over 5 domains or criteria. So number 1, let's talk about social status. By social status, I mean someone who's wealthy or someone who has income potential. Now, in this area, women have a little bit more care about that. Although women are making more and more money, they still would rather date up or sideways rather than date someone who makes less money than them. And it's not a deal breaker by any stretch for most women, but it is true that women do care a little bit more about social status. Now, on the sexual desirability scale, that's where men tend to have more care about a woman's looks, and that's true. But again, it's not that women don't care about what a man looks like. But on the other side of that, because I know men get very nervous about that, interesting, it's the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Because when we look at physical attractiveness for what a woman is looking for, we tend to think of some really strong, muscular guy. And according to the data, only about 15% of women prefer a very muscular guy. They prefer someone who's a little more average. As a matter of fact, I think it's about 80% of women prefer a guy who is, quote unquote, has more of a dad bod. Now, this could be for a lot of reasons. Maybe they are not physically attracted to that. Maybe it makes them feel comfortable and safe because other women aren't looking at their man. Maybe it's because I've seen other studies where they say women feel more comfortable about themselves when they're around a guy who's a little more overweight, so it allows them to be able to eat more and not feel bad about themselves. But be that as it may, sexual desirability is a little bit lower on a woman's scale and a little higher on a man's scale. But those are very slight differences. Let's get to where they're very, very equal. Now we're talking about socially appealing traits. And these would include things like intelligence, honesty, trustworthiness, ambitious, warmth. But the number one for men and women is kindness. So kindness goes a long way. So again, you could have a six-pack abs, you could have a nice car, but if we're talking long-term relationship, kindness is the way to go. Now, let's talk about warmth for a second, because that's very important to men. Because from a lot of men that I've talked to, when women do well in business, they tend to use that business mind in their relationship. And warmth to a man means someone who is more agreeable, meaning that men are very combative most of the time with other men, but they don't want to have a relationship with a woman where they're arguing about every little thing and having debates. So in terms of personality models, we're looking at agreeableness, and women typically are more agreeable than men, and men typically prefer that. Also with warmth, a man likes a woman who laughs at his jokes. Interestingly, a woman likes a man who's humorous. So that kind of goes together. Now, if the woman is extremely humorous, men don't seem to care much about that. So I don't know why that is in the data like that, and I can't prove it any which way, but that just seems to be the way it works. So that's socially appealing traits. So then we have similarities to self. And here we see almost the exact same for men and women in terms of long-term relationships. They want someone who has the same virtues and values as them, the same interests, and maybe you can share same leisure activities. It makes sense, right? Like if you're going to go on vacation, one person loves to go to museums, let's say, and another person would prefer to sleep on the beach on some island. Well, there's going to be a little bit of a discrepancy there. Not that that can't be worked out, but it is easier to get along with somebody long term when you share the same interests and you like to do the same leisure activities. So number 5 on the domain or criteria, we talk about outgoing personality. And here we're talking about friendliness, we're talking about being expressive with your emotions, again with the humor, and someone who's sociable, which is really interesting when you think about it, because there's a lot of men these days, right? Like there's 2 ships passing in the night, right? You got the younger guys seem to be a little bit more open with their emotions, and you have these older guys that seem to really dig in on gender roles. In other words, they're not allowed to have feelings and emotions, they're not allowed to cry. But the data does not suggest that. So that they were sold some bad medicine by their parents or society at the time. But if you look at the data now, that might be good for a short-term relationship to make a woman feel comfortable around a guy who's not overly emotional. But in terms of long-term relationships, again, friendliness, being emotionally expressive, humor, being sociable, those are all green lights for everybody to be able to have access to all their emotions. And so if a guy is contemplating or in a relationship and says, I'm not allowed to show my emotions, I'm not allowed to cry, I think it's probably more a problem with how they were raised and within themselves, because they're afraid to express. Because the data does not indicate in any way that women are afraid of a man who's good with his emotions. Now there's a difference. There's a difference between being understanding of your emotions and being able to express in a way, as opposed to being angry and abusive. That's different. That's not being able to express emotions. That is supposedly a masculine quality, but in no way is good for a relationship. So again, the biggest differences we see here is that women tend to look for men in long-term relationships that have income potential or already have some money, and men look for women that are a little more, say, physically attractive. That's important to them. So that's about the information I wanted to give you today. But I have 3 quick questions that I've gotten from other people, and I want to do them quick, and I want to do them together because they all are basically saying the same thing. I want to make sure I get these right. So I don't think any one of these are worth doing a whole show on, so I'm just going to zip through this for you. So here are the questions. Do women prefer bad boys? Do nice guys finish last? And do women prefer or love dangerous men? All right, so this is actually pretty easy. So if you look up a lot of stuff online, what you're going to get is a lot of things that are not based on data. They're not based on peer review articles, journals, anything like that. You're going to get a bunch of people who are trying to sell things to men, and then you're going to get other people trying to sell things to women. So here it is. If you are looking for a long-term relationship, women do not like bad boys. And do nice guys finish last? No, not when you're looking for a long-term relationship. But here's the caveat. If we're looking at short-term relationships, and by short I mean a one-night stand, think about it. So where are you going to meet somebody that you're going to have sex with that you don't know for very long? Well, most likely you're getting drunk, you're getting high, the person you're going after is drunk or high. In my own personal experience, I've never had a problem getting girls in my life, but I can tell you if I'm in a situation like that, I do finish last because I don't participate. And nice guys don't participate in that type of thing because you're not looking for a relationship in that sense. So that's not going to work. Do women prefer bad boys? In that sense, if they're looking for a one-night stand, yes. Because what nice person is going to be drunk and go over to a girl and start hitting on them? It doesn't happen like that. So almost by definition, if she's with somebody, he's going to be a bad guy. So again, you're not winning anything here unless you're looking for a one-night stand. So again, women don't prefer bad boys. Those are just the ones who have the guts to go over to people and start hitting on them. So that's not the same thing. But this one here is a little bit more dangerous because do women love dangerous men? Now, this has been said a lot of times in conservative circles that I've noticed. And the poster boy for this is a clinical psychologist by the name Jordan Peterson, who's extremely popular, extremely famous, and makes a massive amount of money. And he pushes this, that women like dangerous men. I'm going to keep this short because information that he gives and he sends to men who buy his stuff, it's extremely dangerous and it's misguided and it's misinformation that's sold to misogynistic men. And that's big business these days. So no, women do not like dangerous men. As a matter of fact, let me say it as clearly as I can. Of the 50% of women who are going to get murdered in the next year are murdered by their intimate partners. Let that sink in. Do women really like dangerous men? Any man who's a clinical psychologist who's worth millions of dollars that's selling this kind of stuff, he should lose his license like immediately. Let me throw in this too, just for information. Of the 1 out of 4 women who have experienced sexual assault or rape, 85% of the time, it's men that they know. And as we look into that more, there's about 20% of women out there that their first real sexual experience was a rape. The thought of a clinical psychologist peddling this BS is ridiculous to me. So the answer is definitively no. Women do not like dangerous men. So I hope you liked today's show. I hope you thought it was interesting and informative. My name is Joe Peroni, and hopefully you will subscribe, and hopefully you might tell a few friends. Thank you.